Outreach meeting number 1. Just so that we do a few housekeeping things, we are going to go ahead and record the meeting today. We'll make sure that that's available. There may be others that were possibly not able to participate, or if you've got others possibly on your staff that you'd like to share this with, we're going to record to go for about 2 hours this morning. But we have a lot of information that we want to share, and just make sure that we give engineers and developers and interested parties the opportunity for some questions and answers today. I know that we have a little over 60 people who are on call this morning. I see that we have Councilman McAtee with us, so welcome, Councilman McAtee. I did not see that we had any other council, at least at the moment, that it's possible that we will have some additional city council members present. We have several staff that are online from the City of Oklahoma City that will be able to introduce themselves as we start this morning. We also have 2 key consultants with us this morning. We have Brian Mitchell with Smith Roberts Ballishfire, and we have Tim Johnson with Johnson and Associates. The City of Oklahoma City engaged both of these firms to assist in the drafting of the documents this morning, so I appreciate that they're both online and available for questions this morning as well, too. So with that, Debbie Miller and Barry Lodge with Public Works are going to help lead our discussion. I want to make sure that everybody knows that we have the documents available online at okc.gov. If you follow the links to Public Works, you can download a copy of the draft drainage ordinance. Also the drainage criteria manual is online. And then we'll put the PowerPoint slides, which hopefully you can see now on, and we'll kind of use that as a guide this morning as we walk through. So is everybody good? All right. Thank you, Debbie.
This is Debbie Miller with Public Works. Let's go to. Oops. Oh, the introductions. Meeting protocol. We wanted to go ahead and put some housekeeping rules in. Please mute your microphone. Use chat to ask any questions or raise your hand, and we'll call on you after the presentation and try to answer any questions you may have. The documents, like Eric said, are found at okc.gov/publicworks. You can find the drainage ordinance, which is Chapter 16 of the Municipal Code, criteria manual, and we put together a summary of proposed revisions between the existing ordinance and what the new ordinance includes. The agenda for today's meeting, we're going to discuss and go over the drainage ordinance revisions. The Chapter 16 revisions include the definition updates, and we were cleaning up inconsistencies. And we're going to discuss the drainage criteria manual, which is something new, and we've been
you went mute.
Oh, I thought it was just me, Keith.
Yeah, I'm not able to hear anything either.
Yeah. So Debbie,
So did you not hear anything I said?
we're hearing parts of it, and then we lost you.
You went mute, really maybe slide good. Number 2.
Oh, it's slide number 2. Okay, well, let me go back and I will start over. Okay. I'm really glad you guys are all here, and I apologize for the mute. I don't know how that happened. Meeting protocol, housekeeping rules. Please mute your microphone. You can use chat to ask any questions or raise your hand and we'll call on you. As Eric had said, documents are found at okc.gov/publicworks. You will be able to find the draft drainage ordinance, Chapter 16, the new drainage criteria manual, and a summary of proposed revisions. That we put these together so you can kind of see what the changes are between the existing ordinance and what we're proposing. The agenda for today, we're going to discuss the revisions we're making to Chapter 16. Part of that is definition update and cleanup of inconsistencies. And we're also going to talk about the new drainage criteria manual. And like I said previously, I'm really excited that we get to bring this to you. This has been a lot of hard work that staff and our consultants have worked on. And I'm anxious to hear what you guys think. Okay, a little history. And this was interesting, I didn't realize this, that the drainage ordinance was put into the code in 1970 as Chapter 15A, and it was the Drainage and Flood Control Ordinance. Since then, we have had 15 revisions approved by Council since 1981, updating the ordinance. We do have periodic updates every time FEMA has a mapping update on their maps, and so those are also included in the ordinance. And we have those too. The need for the revisions, we need to address the inconsistencies within Chapter 16. We wanted to revise the definitions to be more consistent with FEMA. We wanted to remove the actual design criteria out of the ordinance and make it more of a regulatory document. So that's where the drainage criteria manual comes in. And revise the drainage design criteria to address the current, future, and flooding issues. Every time it rains, we get complaints, and so a lot of the updates are to help address those. I'm going to turn this over to Barry Lodge, and Michelle is on the line too, and he's going to go through the changes and what's included. There you go, Barry.
All right, well, this is Barry Lodge with the Public Works Department, City of Oklahoma City. To go through the major changes that we're making to the drainage ordinance and what's being added into the drainage criteria manual. I'll go through all of these. When we get to the end, we'll open it up for some questions, but just for continuity's sake, wait until we get to the end for your questions. You can raise your hand and then we'll open it up. Michelle, as I'm going through this stuff, if you have something you want to interject, jump right in. I'll try not to belabor too many of the points. The slide that's up there now shows kind of the major items that are being changed that we're addressing. Detention, open drainage channels, our drainage criteria manual, changes to the storm sewer system design criteria, public versus private storm sewer systems. That'll be kind of a big change to it. And then we're making some revisions to our requirements on the floodplain activity permits. So starting with detention, this is something that we've been looking at. All of the consultants that have been doing design in the city of Oklahoma City for any length of time at all, well, you'll understand that currently our requirement is for detention for the 100-year storm only. So one of the things that we are doing in this is that we're going to a multi-frequency outlet design. And I'm starting from the bottom of the slide. Hope that doesn't mess anybody up. So we're going to start requiring the outlet structures to be designed for the 2 through the 100-year events instead of just the 100-year event. Another change that we're going to make, previously we had an allowance in the ordinance for a fee in lieu of detention based on certain criteria. We are taking out the allowance or requirement for the fee in lieu of detention, and we're substituting that in its place to where we will have a waiver of the detention requirement that will be possible. A couple of circumstances where the waiver would be considered would be if your site drains directly to a public street or a public storm sewer, that would be considered. If your site drains directly to a creek or a river channel, then it would be considered. An area where we would not give consideration to the waiver for the detention would be if your site discharges onto an adjacent property. And in that case, if a waiver was granted, you'd be increasing the discharge onto the neighbor's property and thereby potentially damaging their property. So that would be one of the circumstances that the waiver of the on-site detention would not be considered. The next fairly major change to this on our open drainage channels, currently the ordinance is set up so that land lying below the 50-year storm had to be contained within the channel, within the easement. So we're changing that to a requirement for the 100-year storm event instead. So with that land would have to be either the channel would have to be designed if you're grading a new channel to convey the runoff from the 100-year storm event. In the case of an existing channel that is going to be in a common area or an easement, that common area or easement will now have to cover the full area that would be inundated by the 100-year storm event. And I will throw in here also that as we're talking about the 100-year event, the 50-year event, all of these storms, we are updating the ordinance to state that those are based on the higher of the FEMA queues or urbanized discharge queues. If none exist, one would have to be calculated. But that would be what the requirement with the drainage channels. One of the more significant changes in the ordinance is that we are removing the design criteria that's been previously published in the ordinance and moving it into a separate drainage criteria manual. This has been in the works for a number of years, and so it's going to be really nice to have this readily available to everyone. So we've taken that out of the ordinance. The DCM, however, is referenced as part of the ordinance. So it's being approved simultaneous with the revisions to the drainage ordinance. The main thing that is written into the ordinance for the drainage criteria manual is that as we go through and see the need to make revisions to our drainage criteria, that revision can be approved by the city engineer without having to go back through the council. And that's more of a time savings issue on going that route with it. We have discussed it internally, and so if we come up with any revisions to the criteria manual, we will post those on the website. We're looking at a minimum of 60 days before those revisions become effective. So we're not going to try to spring anything new on anyone. You submit a set of plans and all of a sudden some of the criteria change. Those will be posted. Another revision to the ordinance and the design criteria will be for the storm sewer systems. Currently, the ordinance states that storm sewer systems are designed for the 10-year event. The streets have to be designed to carry the 25-year storm without exceeding the top of curves, and we're going to keep that requirement. However, we're going to change it to a 25-year storm event design. And a lot of that has to do with just complaints that we receive on street flooding, intersection flooding, and it's kind of a step to try to eliminate or at least reduce some of the occurrence of flooding situations that we come up with. The next item, and this previously I don't believe was in the ordinance where it's had any discussion concerning public and private storm sewer. So we've added language to the ordinance about public and private systems, and this has been an item, an issue that has come up several times over the last number of years concerning what's public, what's private, who's going to regulate what systems. And so we've tried to explain or define some of the differences between the public and private. So I'm going to read through these. I know you guys are all capable of reading the slides just as well, but just so we get it out there. So the first criteria, if all of the drainage, stormwater runoff on a development site, if it's generated on that site, the storm sewer system will be private and will be maintained by the property owner. The city will not take ownership or maintenance responsibility for that type of system. When we get to the private storm sewer systems, and this will be a change in relation to how things have happened in the past. Previously, the public and private storm sewer systems were required to be submitted to Public Works Engineering for review and approval. That will no longer be the case. Private storm sewer systems will not be submitted to Public Works. We will not review or approve them. They will not be inspected by Public Works inspection staff. Instead, the private storm sewer systems are going to be submitted to plan review in development services. They will be responsible for the review of plans, and their plumbing inspectors will be doing the inspection.
I just wanted to jump in here and kind of give a little history. When development services was taken out of Public Works and into development services, it's its own department, we have been in the process of trying to separate public versus private. So they are going to handle all private and we handle anything that's in the right of way. So that's one of the reasons we're making this change.
With that, can you address what's going to be required for tap-in permits?
I think the tap-in permits will be the same as they are now. If you've got a, if you are tying a private storm sewer system into a public system, then that will be handled the same way it has been previously with a tap fee.
And tap permit is inspected by the field services inspector.
Yeah. Okay. On this next slide, our public storm sewer systems. It'll be a public storm sewer system if a off-site drainage area greater than or equal to 6 acres flows onto your development site. We kind of kicked around what size that should be. We landed at 6 acres. That could be one that could possibly be a revision in the future. A public storm sewer system will also be required if you have an upstream development and that storm sewer system discharges onto your development site, whether that is a public system or a private system, your system will be a public storm sewer system will be submitted to Public Works Engineering for review. All of the public systems will still be submitted to Public Works for review and approval. And here's one thing I do want to point out. There's been a lot of question come up over the past several months. We need to have a specific dedication of that storm sewer system to the city. A lot of the plat dedications in the past have read that the streets and easements have been dedicated to the city for maintenance, and we need to have you guys get real specific on that and state that the storm sewer infrastructure is being dedicated to the city. That'll be kind of a change for you, but make note of that. It will eliminate a lot of confusion.
Mohammed, you have a question?
Thank you, Debbie. This is Mohammed with SMC Consulting. Going back to the review of private storm system by the development services, what type of design criteria they will be using to review the private storm system? Are they thinking to go to International Plumbing Code, which is entirely different than what typically a site storm sewer system is designed? Thank you.
That's a good question, Mohammed. Here is the way that this is my interpretation of it. I don't know that we've actually had that specific discussion yet. My interpretation of this is going to be that your design of the system will still be the same design, the same design criteria that you would use for a public system. I think it's gonna come down a lot to the plumbing code as they are inspecting the construction. The one thing that we won't do, you'll be able to, as far as your on-site storm sewer systems, you can set your design frequency. That's not really going to be reviewed as part of that private plan submittal. So it's going to be a combination. A lot of this is going to put the responsibility for coming up with the design criteria onto the consultants. That we've had that requested a number of times. Why does the city get involved in reviewing public drainage system or private drainage systems? And so this has been kind of our compromise on that. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and we'll get back to you with some additional private storm sewer criteria. We can let you know, get with development services, and we'll get some additional information back to you. Michelle?
Oh, I was just going to mention that there are some discrepancy if we're looking at the plumbing code right now and the design criteria that we normally have, such as the slope, the minimum slope for plumbing code is 1%, but we are allowing 0.5% or 0.4% on our slope for the pipe. So those are some discrepancy, and also from one manhole to another manhole, they have a shorter distance than what our normal design are. So we do aware some of the discrepancy between our design criteria and the plumbing code, and we're still working to resolve those issues.
All right. The next change that we are looking to make is on the floodplain activity permits. We've had some questions and comments in the past concerning the requirement for FEMA elevation certificates for structures that are not within the limits of the FEMA mapped floodplain, but that are within 200 feet of the boundary of that mapped floodplain. So the new ordinance, the new requirement will be that the FEMA elevation certificate will no longer be required for buildings or structures that are adjacent to and within 200 feet of a FEMA mapped floodplain. However, we still will have the requirement that in those situations for the two-part building permits where a surveyor certificate or a surveyor's elevation certificate will be required prior to the issuance of the final portion of the building permit. If the structure is within the limits of the FEMA floodplain, it's a location that's had a LOMR based on fill or a LOMA based on fill, or it just happens to be above and the FEMA floodplain covered that structure, a FEMA elevation certificate will be required in those situations. Even if you show that, that FEMA map floodplain may not be exactly correct, We still have to honor that when we start looking at FEMA requirements, and you will be required to do a FEMA elevation certificate. So now back to Debbie. She's going to talk about this a little bit, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Yeah, I'll wait on the schedule. We can go over that at the end, but I was going to go ahead and open it up for any questions that you guys may have. Let's see if I can get this one.
So this is Eric Winger again. I think, one of the things that we have been asked several times is, when are criteria manual updates happening? When is the ordinance going to be updated? And today is really that official day where we're starting that discussion. We thought it was really important to come out to you as stakeholders, to you as developers, to you as engineers and consultants, to really have some input and be a part of the process, making sure that we get everything addressed that's needed to be addressed over the past several years. We have done a lot of research with surrounding communities to make sure that we're not over requiring or making changes that would not be similar or already in place with our surrounding communities, including Norman and Edmond. And then, as I mentioned when we kicked off the meeting, we really wanted to put our best foot forward. We did engage two of our local consultants, as I mentioned, Smith Roberts Ballerswater with Brian Mitchell and Johnson and Associates, Tim Johnson, to receive a lot of their input to make sure that we would not bring things to you today during this meeting that we knew just would not be acceptable in Oklahoma City. So my thank you to both of them again for all of their hard work. It's been a long year's effort or more getting this ready, but we're open to additional suggestions. We're looking for your support before we go forward and present any of the information to the City Council.
I think Mark Grubbs has a question.
Yes, thanks, Debbie. So we mentioned the changes on the drainage channel, the comment that it would be required to contain the 100-year. By reading through that, it's not only the 100-year, but it's also an additional 1 foot of freeboard. Is that correct?
Mark, this is Barry. That was not the intent of what we're writing, so we'll have to go back in and look at that and verify it. The intent.
In section 5.5.
Oh, it's in the drainage ordinance, the drainage
of the criteria manual?
Of the criteria manual, correct.
Okay, we'll look at that. That was not the intent. We wanted it to just cover the limit, the 100-year storm.
And then another thing that I noticed that wasn't mentioned in your overview on the changes to the detention, not only are you requiring the multi-stage release storage, but you're also requiring a foot of freeboard on the detention as well?
Yes, I believe that is correct. We are going to go with that requirement.
And then just one other clarification on the storm sewer, the private versus public. You've stated that on-site runoff, generated on-site runoff would be considered private, but and it's stated throughout the ordinance and the drainage criteria manual that way. But I think clarity that if it's in the right of way, in a public right of way, but it's on-site storm sewer, then it would be public or private?
Good question.
That is another good question.
Okay, Mark, let us look into.
If I'm designing a residential subdivision that all the drainage is generated on-site, no off-site, but we're putting the storm sewer in the right of way, then that's a big question in my mind. So.
Okay, well, let us look at that, and we can get back with you on what we come up with.
Hey, Mark, this is Michelle. One thing, if you can send us your comment or question to the PW drainage so that we can have it documented and making sure that we don't forget about you from this meeting.
Yeah,
just want to make sure that I remember your question so we can have it addressed and documented.
I've got quite a few more. I was just it was just the points that were covered there. I just wanted to make some clarifications on those highlights. So
Guys, the public is you have 6 acre coming to your site, but we can address that. We can post those questions out and I'll respond to the web as well. We can have it figured out.
Yeah, we will look at that because that lines up with a private storm sewer within a public easement, and that can create problems. So that is an issue that we'll need to look at.
Thank you, Mark. Kendall Dillon, you have a question?
Yeah, real quick. How do we plan on implementing this with new preliminary plats, or the minute that it goes into effect and is adopted by council? It's generally what I'm thinking is we design all of these subdivisions that are quarter sections, sometimes larger. We've got one phase built or 2 phases or however we designed the whole thing comprehensively based upon the current ordinance, detention in particular. So if we've already started the subdivision, do we now have to go back and try to figure out a way to redesign it to include detention, or how are we going to handle those issues?
No, Kendall, I think if there's something that's already under construction or already has a final plat that has been submitted and is in the review process, that would be excluded from the new requirements. Anything that's going forward, though, from the time that the ordinance becomes effective would be reviewed under the new criteria. So it's very possible that you would have a multi-phase development where 1 or 2 phases have been constructed without a detention requirement. The 3rd phase comes in, and it very well could require detention on that. And that's kind of the way it'll be reviewed. That will then, it could fall under the provision for a waiver. But waivers are going to be things that are going to have to be proven by you to us as far as what the impact is going to be.
Yeah, I think certainly there needs to be some consideration of that, waivers and everything else, because like I say, and I understand where you're coming from, but even from an economical standpoint and everything else, if you look at these developments that we've already got everything set up, and then to redesign it, to add detention, or to, account for the storm sewer design and potential grade differences and those sort of things, it's going to create a mess on a lot of these things. So hopefully, there's some consideration given to that. To me, it seems, I know it's complicated. I don't know that it can be done, but it'd be nice to just start new preliminary plats off with the current criteria.
Kendall, this is Eric Winger. I think we want to work with you on that, and we realize there's a lot of long-range planning that goes into some of the master plans that you and other consultants have worked on. We are going to have to come up with a policy or a procedure on how to receive those. So I think what Barry answered is generally correct. We may just need to be a little more forward about if you do have a plan like that, that's a multi-year plan that you've already got a layout for, that we just go ahead and receive it early and go ahead and have it recorded by Public Works that it's underway. But what we have to avoid is 2 years from now, getting a notice from a consultant that a plat finally has a design and trying to retroactive something that old. We just need to get notice of what those are now. So we'll get that clarification to you, and we'll get a procedure or a policy issued so that you'll know how to submit those if you've got some plans that are already in that status.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Mohammed, do you have another question?
Thank you, Debbie. About that section 3.3 in the drainage criteria manual, where it talked about capturing the flow from curb inlet on a street with grade, and then there is a discussion about bypass flow. What kind of design criteria are you looking into for consultants to show that, how to show that what the bypass flow is and what is captured You're looking into HAC 22 or other standards?
Can you tell me where that is one more time, Mohammed? I'm looking in the criteria manual to look, to see where you're talking, what you're talking about.
3.3.
Yeah, it's a section 3.3.1 and subsection C. And sorry, Barry, we can also follow up with a written comment, but I just thought to kind of discuss that, find out from your thoughts is about showing for consultant to show the bypass flow and how the flow is captured from curb inlet when those are at grade and not in a sump condition.
Okay, I hear about that by on D, okay, that's what we want to see. Yeah, I think what we're looking for on that is really not anything different than what the criteria is now. When you get to a sump location, your storm sewer at that point is going to be designed to, it has to intercept the 50 years flow from that entire drainage basin, from the upstream areas as well. So if you're picking up the 25 year in your on-grade inlets, when you get down to the sump, that sump inlet has to pick up the 50 year for the specific basin that's draining to it, plus the difference between the 50 and the 25 for the inlets that are upstream of that. That's what the intent of that is, which is exactly what's been happening for as long as I've been doing all this stuff here. And then from that, once you get to that sump inlet, then you have to provide an overflow flume that's going to provide the difference between the 100-year storm and the 50. And again, that's going to be for the entire drainage basin that would get to that sump location. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, partly. The other related question will be that, okay, we address the sump condition. Now what happens on the at grade curb inlet location where there is going to be a bypass? What type of methodology you would like consultant to show how the bypass flow is calculated?
Currently we're using, and it goes into that section 3.3.2 where we have the inlet capacities, and we would continue to use that. If you get to whatever your design Q is and you put in a design 2-2 inlet, it's going to intercept 18.2 CFS. If you've got 28 CFS flowing in the street, then you're going to bypass 10. And so it's going to be, we're going to keep it that simple. There's a lot of methods out there that you get into the HEC 12, HEC 22 methods, and the bypasses they're difficult to come up with. Not to mention that the inlets get larger, the storm sewer pipe inlets get more frequent, but that'll be the process that we would look at.
Well, I appreciate you simplifying it. One more question, and then I'll let you go. Section 4.3, where it talks about the minimum slope of like 0.5%, and Michelle touched on it earlier. Then there's also a discussion about meeting the minimum velocity criteria for a storm sewer. We all know that sometimes a storm sewer could be flatter than 0.5% and is still able to show that velocity exceeding 2.5%, which is minimum. So would that be easier to follow just one criteria, or you have to have both criteria met, velocity as well as minimum slope?
Yeah, I think that will be a circumstance that we would have to look at on a kind of a case-by-case basis. I think we're all aware that there are times when a 0.5% slope is not going to be obtainable. You just can't get it, and we understand that. So what I would encourage on that is, rather than just making the assumption that we're okay with that and designing it and sending it in, send us an email, give us a phone call. Let's address that up front we can look at it before you prepare your plans and make a determination. Yet, we're not going to be hard and fast on these where we can't make any changes at all. There may be circumstances and you send it in and say, "No, I just can't get it. Here's the reason. Show us why you can't maintain the 0.5%. We'll review it, and if that looks like, yeah, we agree with that, then we would approve a variance to this requirement." I don't want to have a lot of contact where we get a call and just say, "Well, we can't meet a 0.5% slope. Can we get a variance to that?" Well, the answer to that would be no, until you prove to us why you can't do it. So when you make these requests, back them up, give us some justification on that as well. But say these are not cast in stone. You have to do it this way and under every circumstance, because it's not a one size fits all on storm sewer design.
Barry is correct. Barry is correct, and I want to make some addition to that. Is we have seen a lot of slope that less than 0.5% when we review plans, and we also look at such as Muhammad's design that he will usually show what is the velocity having the less than 0.5% slope, and if it's more than 2.5% foot per second, we'll be okay with that. So we do consider couple different factors, not just like if it's not meeting minimum 0.5%, then we're rejecting. So we do consider that. I just want to add that to the conversation.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, Stephen, you've been very patient. Stephen Cooksey.
Yes, thanks, Debbie. I just had a couple of comments. One, just to reiterate on the private storm sewer, I think that'll be critical to nail down the criteria that Development Services is going to use, just so we're all clear of how our drawings and plans are going to be reviewed. So just want to reiterate that and make sure we get that clarified going forward. My comment with the overflow structure for detention pond. So section 4 in the criteria manual, it talks about kind of at the top of the page on page 31, the overflow structure shall function with all of the discharge elements fully blocked without exceeding the allowable historic discharge rate. So the way that reads, and I may be misunderstanding this, but the way that reads is that you're basically going to have two outlet structures. You're going to have a primary outlet structure that's going to control all your storm events, but then you've also got to design this concrete overflow structure to also control your storm events with respect to. So I just wanted some clarification on that and what the thought process was on that.
Stephen, that's a question that we've gotten from another consultant as well. And that's one of the things we need to look into a little bit. It may be that we go back and look at this and make a revision to it, that the overflow structure would have to pass the 100-year storm without overtopping the pond dam. It may be a little difficult to put in a primary outlet structure that's going to control all of our frequency storms, and then put in an overflow structure that would also limit only the 100-year. And so that's what we want to look at. I think the intent of this really was that we have an overflow structure for the 100-year storm in case somebody throws a mattress in the detention pond and it blocks up the whole thing. We want to be able to get the water out without overtopping the pond dam, because that's when we start running into a lot of problems if you start overtopping that embankment. So we're going to look at that. That's a good question, and we did have that come in from another consultant as well.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. I mean, I think the not overtopping the dam, that makes sense, and having that spillway basically as a release so that you don't have a catastrophic failure. I mean, that makes sense to me. So I appreciate the response.
Yes, and one thing, if I can, just reiterate what Michelle had mentioned when Mark Grubbs was asking questions a while ago. If you guys could, we're trying to take notes on all of these questions right now, but I don't take shorthand, and so there could be some things we miss. So if you can, use the comment form and email those in. Or if you just send an email, that would work too, but send them to that pwdrainage@okc.gov. That way we'll have a written record of every comment and question that you guys have, so that we don't overlook anything. We want to be sure that we take into consideration all of your questions and comments.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who has any questions? Oh, Alec Bass?
Yeah, Debbie. Section 6.5 with the underground detention, it lists the allowable materials, and it's RCP, PVC, and HP. I just wanted to confirm, were the contact metal systems intentionally omitted here?
They were not intentionally omitted. We're looking at some modification to this that would allow, the only one I have seen the request on so far is the ADS thermoplastic chambers. And you know, we're looking at that being, I think they've been used in several places already, so we're looking at adding that in there. If you can send, in your comments, send the request with that specific system, and we'll look at it.
Darren Smith?
I just want to ask you to be willing to provide us with a participation certificate. I believe this qualifies for PDH requirements in our license renewal.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. We can do that, Darren.
Thank you. I'm a little far behind.
That's okay. Mohammed, do you have another question?
Thank you, Debbie. This is Mohammed again. Barry or Michelle, would you mind looking at section 6.2.1 and a little bit talk about it a little more where it talks about analysis of the off-site upstream area in detention analysis to be considered as fully urbanized or in historical condition for detention pond design?
I think, Mohammed, I think that the intent on the historic conditions, since we are now looking at the situation where citywide, the requirement will be to provide detention for every site. And in this specific instance would fall under that condition where we would not grant a waiver because you've got offsite area draining onto an adjacent property. That being said, that would then say that the offsite property is providing detention because they're now draining onto your adjacent property. Your existing condition then would be the historic or the existing conditions of that property, not the urbanized condition. That makes sense?
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, we thought the same way, Kendall and our engineering group. We always thought the same way that offsite area shouldn't be considered as urbanized because they're supposed to provide their own detention. And I was disconnected for a few seconds, so I completely couldn't hear all your reply, Barry. But if I get the meaning of it, you are saying that the offsite upstream area will be considered historic conditions.
That is correct.
Thank
Will be considered historic condition.
Hey, Mohammed, this is Michelle. So the current analysis is we're taking the upstream offsite as urbanized for both existing and proposed. This is to make sure that your detention pond or your site is allowing the offsite urbanized to pass through it, but not detaining any, since you have to see the same for both existing and proposed. And we have less control currently per the current ordinance. We have less control on the detention pond, so we don't want your site to flood. However, with the new adoption of the ordinance revision and the criteria manual, it allows us to have more control on all the detention pond on site. So with that adoption, we would be allowing the offsite upstream as the CO.5 with the existing condition, because every site would have to provide on-site detention pond unless there is an analysis to show no negative impact to downstream adjacent property owner.
Thank you. I'm with
Maybe
you.
one quick addition there. We would use, and not to contradict what Michelle was saying directly, but if the site offsite is draining onto you, if it's currently developed and it drains onto you, but it was not required to provide detention when it was done, it may be a school or a shopping center that comes onto you. You will have to consider that in its existing condition, whatever that happens to be. Agree with that, Michelle? That makes sense?
I got lost for a little bit.
Well, and what we've done in the past, the way we looked at this is we would always do the storm sewer design assuming no detention was in place. And now that detention is required everywhere, we're able to look at it a little more, like Michelle said, we have a little more control and we can look at it and say, oh, well, there is detention here. You can design this for what's coming on site.
Yeah, the intent of the having offsite urbanized is because we don't have that much control, and we try not to flood the on-site downstream. And we do see, we do consider every possibility. If you can show, let's say, the downstream, the downstream existing storm sewer was designed having urbanized offsite, which is your site, that means the downstream storm sewer is adequate to take in your urbanized flow. So detention pond may not be required. So we look into those as well. So just feel free to give us a call if you have any question in prior of design of your site. We'll be happy to help.
Thank you.
Anyone else have questions? Going once? Going twice? Okay, well, I will talk about our next steps that we have coming up. We do have another public meeting like this one next Friday. So if some didn't get to attend this one, we have that one available. We would like to have your comments back to us by March 26th so we can go through those and revise the ordinance and get it into a final form. We would like to introduce this to City Council the end of April. There would be a public hearing May the 11th, and it would be approved May 25th. And if it's approved on May 25th, 30 days later, it would go into effect. So those are the final steps, and I appreciate everyone who's participated. Those were some really good questions.
Can I ask one comment here before everybody gets off? I think on the website, I had put in there that we need to have their comments by March the 5th. That gives us a chance to go through those and make sure what we want to do by March 26th.
So if you could have your comments to us by March the 5th, that would be great, because we do need to have a little bit of time to go through those and make responses. So I apologize for that. Thank you, Barry. March 5th.
Hey, Debbie, is that on your previous slide that we can probably show it on the screen?
If I can get back there to it. There you go. If you guys want to write that stuff down, or if you have any questions, just let us know, give us a call.
With comments and revisions by March the 5th, and send in your comments in writing.
Yeah, that way we can keep track and have a history of what the concerns were and how we address them. So we really appreciate that.
Let's do that next slide. So this is the links to the website and also the email address that we'd like for you to utilize for any of those comments. So please use these. Staff's also available if you've got any questions. So again, I want you to feel free to reach out to Barry Lodge, to Michelle January, to Debbie Miller. We want to make sure that we've included absolutely everything before we finalize the documents. You're encouraged to participate again next Friday. It doesn't mean that if you participated today that you can't. So we encourage you, if something comes up in the next week and it's just easier to discuss that next Friday, please log back in with us next Friday. And I think to better answer Theron Smith's question, if you would like a PDH certificate, please go ahead and mail that request to also the pwdrainage@okc.gov, and we'll make sure that we get a certificate if you're needing those development hours sent back. We're not going to send it to everyone. You'll need to go ahead and make that request, and we'll get you a certificate for that today. Again, I wanted to appreciate it. I think we ended up with 2 council members on our phone call today. So again, thank you, Councilman McAtee. And then I also saw that Councilwoman Nice had logged in with us today. So we appreciate both of them as well.
Councilperson Cooper here too. Just wanting you all to.
Use Councilman Cooper.
No, I know there's a bunch of people, so I wasn't taking that person. I just wanted you all to know that I'm taking notes as well, and I appreciate everyone's time.
Well, we're glad you joined us.
It
looks like we're going to end up with just a little over 70 participants in the meeting today. So we appreciate everybody's time. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week.
Hey, Debbie, there's a question on the chat. Say, will this presentation, would this presentation and the slide be available?
Sure. I don't see why. Maybe we can have Shannon put it on the website.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get the PowerPoint put on the website, and we are recording the meeting as well, so it will be available.
Okay. Well, thank you to everyone. We appreciate your participation.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.